Oh, well, thanks. Thanks for all being here. And thank you, Sherry, for inviting us. So as far as there being a strict agenda, I would say it's sort of a loosely structured agenda. So we have an agenda, but we would really like this to be conversational. So we're, like Vanessa said, we're not just talking at you. So the reason we're here actually is because I think about a year and a half ago, Vanessa and I did a workshop together and Sherry was there. And later we were on a hike and she said, you know, you guys work in an agile way, which was news to us because we're marketing people. So, so she asked if we would come and have this conversation about the way we work. So we'll tell you our story. We're a collective. We are called the Alkimie Collective. There are actually 4 of us in total, but 3 of us are here today. So really we're here to share our story and then also to, you know, have a conversation about what a collective is and what an agile approach is. Given that in our case, we didn't even really know that that's what we were doing. So we kind of stumbled into it. So we do have a couple questions in here. I know a couple people answered already. If anyone else wants to chime in, as far as what interested you in this topic, and what you know about marketing, you're also welcome to just call it out. We're a small group. So if anyone wants to share anything. Anyone?
I'll ask you. My name's Amy. I was just curious in learning how you all work together, because I know you each do something different. So I'm just wondering how projects are, what process you use to work on projects between all of you or among all of you. Yeah.
Question. Well, we'll kind of dive into that at a high level as we go through kind of our talking points. But the short answer is, you know, I think anyone who kind of operates through an agile model really looks at what are the needs and what are the resources to fill those needs, right? So when we have conversations with clients, then we try to do kind of a discovery to understand what is it that they're looking for. And sometimes what they're looking for after we do a little bit more digging isn't actually what they need. You know, we've come to realize that sometimes a client will say, hey, we just need a new logo. But after having a few more conversations, we realize that they really don't know their brand story. They couldn't go and kind of succinctly and clearly articulate for themselves and to others kind of who their brand is, what their brand is all about. So a logo's all fine and dandy, but if you can't really articulate what you do and who you do it for, then the logo's not going to do much for you. So it's those types of things that we begin to uncover, and then we can bring in the appropriate people to the conversations and to the project to fill the needs based on the needs that we identify in collaboration with the client.
And I'll tack onto that a little bit because Amy, I know you and I have had conversations about this since I am the designer in the group that, you know, for me, coming into this group as a collective really filled that void that Vanessa was just talking about, because as a designer, people just assume, as you know, Amy, that, you know, design is deliverables. So they're like, can I have a logo? Can I have a marketing piece? Can I have a website? Can I have whatever the thing is? And I was actually feeling as a designer that I was doing them a disservice by filling that need without having the strategy in place. And it made my job incredibly hard. So I think that was, you know, part of the glue, I think, as we all came together, recognizing the way, the interplay of everything that we each do.
And building on what, hi, I'm Diane, by the way, what Vanessa and Gili just said, I think it's for education too, like exactly what they're saying. People are looking for deliverables or looking for a specific result. But when they come to us and talk to us, it's nice because we actually get to talk about strategy, and we'll get into more detail about that and what can actually help them get the result they're looking for. They might think what they need is what they need, but it might actually be a quick fix when what we want to help them get to is long-term growth and something that's going to really impact them and give them what they're actually looking for.
And feel free to keep asking questions if anyone has one, but I'm actually going to move to the next slide just because it kind of applies to what we're talking about right now. Anyone else? No? Okay.
I mean, sorry,
Yeah.
it took me a second to find mute. I just like that whole theme of, accidentally agile, which then, in a circular way creates the theme of, well, what is agile and what is not. But to me, one of those things is to bring things back, to bring, the work or the conversation or whatever back to the purpose and to the bigger objectives. And I do this a lot with teams at all levels, from executives down to development teams. It's like, don't give me, yes, we have to execute on a list of tasks, but let's take let's always take, even if it's just 5 minutes, let's take a step back to understand the context we're working in, what we're trying to accomplish. And I think one of the breakthroughs of Agile has always been to believe that everyone, like that we produce better stuff when we all know that, no matter our role.
Agreed.
So I love that you're doing that. That's awesome.
Thank you. We sort of backed up into it. But maybe that actually speaks to the effectiveness of Agile, because maybe, sort of these ideas are out there and we've been implementing them without realizing that that's what we were doing. So in terms of, going forward with this conversation, just to tell you a little bit about who we are and how we roll. So this is our tagline. We believe that people connect with brands that are connected with themselves. So this is actually, we took ourselves through our own branding process. And as you can see, we do strategy, art direction, marketing strategy, and content strategy. And we say that we are a strategy first marketing and brand collective. So with that in mind, we really do work in terms of, setting that groundwork, creating a foundation, like who is a company, what do they stand for, who are they speaking to? That's all that brand strategy work before we layer on the deliverable part and making it visible or putting content to it, so that all of that foundational work really informs the rest of what we do. So that is generally our approach, and because we work as a collective, it kind of cycles through us. So where it may start with Vanessa with brand strategy, it could move to me at some, for art direction, and then go to marketing strategy, and then go to content strategy, and it might circle back around to design again. So it is a very fluid approach.
But we didn't always work this way, though, right? Before creating this collective, we were each working independent of one another, right? We were freelancers, consultants, kind of doing our own things in our own silos. And, as a collective, we kind of operate as a multifaceted product manager, essentially, for our clients, right? Because we help them identify and gain clarity around who their audience is, what their needs are, and also help them get clarity around what are the larger business objectives and goals. And then we're that connection point between those two, right? Like, how do we take those two, connect them, and then bring this vision to reality? So we operate as product managers for our clients. Their businesses, their brands are the product, right? And before we became a collective, we were kind of trying to do that on our own. For example, I am a brand strategist. That's my background. That's what I do. That's what I kind of bring to the table within this collective. But prior to this collective, I was doing it on my own, right? So with brand strategy, it's all about, what is the soul of the brand? Who are you? How do you show up in the world? All the aspects of your brand soul and your brand story really inform how you operate as an organization. It's not just about, the creative execution that the marketing team over there is handling. It's how does that brand truth infiltrate every aspect of the organization, from, your hiring practices to the service and products that you develop. All of those things really are informed by the brand. And so in my role, I was trying to help clients define that for themselves. And that was all fine and dandy until they were ready for, okay, well, now we know who we are, we know our story, we know our soul, but now we need to put that out in the world. what does the logo look like, right? What does the marketing material end up looking like? So when those conversations and questions came up, I was kind of stuck because I could only take that work so far. And I quickly realized that I needed a network and a support system of individuals that provide kind of wraparound services to the work that I do. And that's how I met these ladies ultimately. And Diane will tell you a little bit about Georgina, who isn't here today, and we'll all kind of give our backgrounds, but these, individual experiences that we were having were very parallel, and serendipitously, we were able to find each other to ultimately come together and make this collective.
Is it interruptive right now to ask? I'm curious about the collective versus creating an actual company, or using other words to describe it. I mean, I've had a company and then had like a partner network and of close and distant partners. And so I don't know, you can tell me you're going to answer that later, and that's fine. I'm super curious about it.
No, like we said, this is a conversation, so feel free, anybody, to jump in with your questions as we go. We will talk about that a bit more later, but we can talk about it now too. So like we all really came to each other, and Diane will get into our origin story in a minute, but we didn't want to be an agency. Like we didn't want to be a formal agency with the, all the, kind of the hustle and the restrictions of that model. And actually this will come up later in our conversation too, about kind of what's happened to that model, like just out in the world in general. But we wanted the flexibility. So it was like we wanted the support and the flexibility at the same time. So the support of working with other people who could bolster the work that we each do individually, so that when we come together, we can deliver something that's far more complete. And that gives us the ability to reach a totally different type of client, I think, than most of us could get to on our own. I can say that certainly for me as a designer. But we didn't want it to be this like restrictive, stringent, like you must do this kind of model, or you must be working until your eyes bleed kind of model. Like we really wanted to create something where we have flexibility and freedom to be ourselves and to do good work and to choose what we work on. So that was, I think, it's kind of again, a loose structure. There's some structure to it, but there's a lot of flexibility in it.
I think to add to that, the flexibility really was key for all of us. So, for example, there was a period where I stepped away from the collective because I had a really good opportunity that required my full-time attention. And so during that period, the ladies of the collective were able to kind of step in and support the aspect of the work that I would have managed on their own, or else they would bring in another brand strategist to bolster the work that they were doing. And so being able to go and do that, because that's what made sense for me at that time, and then also be able to come back once that engagement was over, was really nice. You don't always get to do that. You don't ever get to do that really when you have a full-time permanent position, right? But this collective allows for such, really meaningful flexibility for each of us, that we can do what makes sense for us individually, while also still supporting kind of the larger vision and the larger goals of the collective as a whole.
And I think just adding on to what the ladies already said, like that was the point of it, because we came together as individual business owners and we still have our individual businesses. And that's the nice thing, is we can only access so much opportunity and potential on our own, but sounds cliche, but we're stronger together. And we'll talk about our skill sets and, what's complementary and what we all bring to the table. But we wanted to keep the structure loose for that reason, like Yuli and Vanessa were saying, so that we could work on our own things. We could say yes to projects when they come. If we're at capacity, we can, say no, and that is still okay. We can come as we are and show up and give as much as we want to the collective.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So maybe it makes sense to keep going down the line and telling a little bit more about our individual kind of backgrounds and experiences and what ultimately led us here. Diane, if you want to talk about Georgina, since she wasn't able to make it.
Yes, I'll try to do as good of a job as I can. She's super funny and she has a lot of jokes, so I won't be able to do any of that. But Georgina and I actually work in tandem a lot. And when Vanessa had the opportunity and stepped away for a bit, Georgina and I shared a lot of the work. And I think that's, again, agile flexibility, that term's coming up a lot, just where we were able to find our strengths, because while we each have our own lanes, we all have, skill sets that complement each other too. So Georgina has a background in marketing as well as PR, and where her strength really lies in this collective, as it says, is marketing strategy. And then I come in with the content strategy and kind of play together very nice. She focuses on, outlining what are your business goals, what are your objectives, and how does that play into the marketing strategy and the marketing objectives. It's also taking into account sales, and it's really building on the work that Vanessa does, where it's, okay, you have that internal alignment as a brand, as a company, but now how are we going to make sure we're externally aligned when we're communicating our messages? She digs into all of that audience research and, okay, we know who we are, but who are we talking to? And then how can we make a plan to connect with them? And then I kind of come in and play on top of all of that with, okay, now what do we sound like? And how are we communicating? And what types of content are we creating? And again, this plays really nicely into what you do, Gili, too, because I feel like you can come in at all different areas of this process. You're very flexible where, content and design are often seen as deliverables, but, that's why we want to set that strategy too, because they need each other as well. So I think everything we do, we're strong on our own, but we're stronger coming together.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, in terms of the work that I do, I often say I'm the caboose as the designer, because really the design needs to layer on top of everything that's been created. And we often, this is actually Vanessa's analogy that we've used in presentations that we've done, which is a house, like the strategic work is the foundation and the scaffold, the inner structure of the house, and the design is everything that goes on top. So, paint and walls and windows and a roof make no sense if there's nothing underneath it. So that's me. I'm the person who brings the paint and the stucco and all the outer shell, but all of that is informed by the work that the other three have done. So they're really giving me the foundation to build upon. So that really guides the visual process. And then we know, what kind of language are we using? What kind of keywords do we have? What kind of imagery makes sense to communicate all of those things that have been established? But yes, I mean, I do also kind of interject at different points where, once strategy's been laid, I may be doing the foundational pieces of a brand and then come back later after marketing strategy has been determined, because then they're deliverables. So we really try to keep our clients on sort of this very logical trajectory, because I think often when people or business owners think about branding, they can be a little scattershot. It's sort of I need a logo or I need a website. And there's sort of this anxiety about just getting the thing done. So we really try to take them through this very, sort of logical process of let's get this someplace first and then execute on that. And then let's get this someplace first, then second, and execute on that. So it is kind of a circular process.
And I think that's part of the beauty of this model and the way that we approach the work. Agile is all about kind of sprints, right? So buy-in, and there's understanding and alignment throughout the process. A lot of times with, larger agencies or bigger marketing groups, they'll get the project and they kind of go and disappear and do the work, and then they come back and it's ta-da. And so the client doesn't really have an opportunity to give their perspective or, raise the flag if maybe they're going down the wrong path. So we really try to take that agile approach and go and, we have a process, but we are having regular check-ins and we're having touch bases, and we're making sure that the client is sharing any pertinent information with us that could, point us down another path, and also making sure that we're checking in with them to make sure that we're not going down the wrong path. So that approach really helps to create a solid relationship with the client, but it also really helps, kind of streamline the work and make the end product that much more solid, because everyone's nodding heads as we go along, which is exactly the premise of kind of an agile model.
And I think since we have all of our faces up here, minus Georgina, we can go a little bit into, because you all might be curious about this, kind of how we met and formed Unknowingly, this agile collective approach and model. And we'd love to hear your perspective after too, if there's anything we share that like that's agile. So we didn't even know we were doing it. But yeah, I think it was Vanessa, you said, we came together during the pandemic. And I think the beautiful thing is we all have our own individual backgrounds and journeys that have gotten us here to this point. Vanessa, you shared a little bit about your story, and Gili, you have, an immense background in design. And speaking on behalf of Georgina, she has been in the marketing world for a while. And I know my own personal journey has been a roller coaster. It has not been linear at all. And I don't know if that's part of the agile approach with fluidity, but I can definitely speak to that. I personally started off as a life coach back in 2013 and kind of fell into marketing and then had jobs outside of that. But I really came to the decision that I wanted to relaunch my business, do my own thing back in the midst of the pandemic, which is what a lot of us were doing when we came together. We almost had nothing to lose at that point. And for me, something that's really, really important, one of my driving factors is connection and community. And I think, Vanessa, you were one of the first people I connected with out of this collective. And then you brought along Gili and Georgina, and here we are. But we all connected through another group that was, based in community and connection and sharing resources. And I kind of came from that approach as well, that Vanessa and Gili have shared, where, I can write content all day and put things out, but, it doesn't matter if it's not, visually articulated, and, there's a presence to it. So I was always partnering with designers even before I met Gili and other strategists, just trying to make what I was creating, a full presence for the brands I was working with. And I think that's where all of us came at this too. We all kind of came together sharing the same values and approach to branding and marketing and philosophy, and everything else kind of happened organically. We came together just connecting as business owners through the pandemic. We were feeling isolated, and just the conversations that happened turned into, hey, I have a project that's happening. Do you want to work with me on this? And then before we knew it, we were all kind of just sharing resources and work that came to us. And ladies, chime in. I'm trying to think of the one moment where it was like, we should form a collective. I don't know if we ever had a true moment like that where it was like, that's what we should do. I think just like this conversation, it all just happened really organically. And it was like, we're working on a lot of stuff together. We like being in each other's company. We want to meet as frequently as we can. Let's see what we can do together and put ourselves through our own process, which is how we came to become the Alkimie Collective. But I think hopefully I can speak on behalf of all of us when I say this, I feel like it's really benefited, all of us. And I feel like I've grown, and 2 years in now, I don't know if, I would still be here, but I feel like I might be struggling a bit more. And I feel like it's just, we are stronger together, and I'm my own worst enemy personally. So I would have probably been like, oh, I hit another wall again. But having this support system and knowing you have people to talk to and being able to create this really fluid, flexible work model has been super beneficial. How do you ladies feel about it?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think one thing I've often said is, that all of us are kind of a portal into this group. And again, as a designer, one of the biggest challenges I've encountered is, people coming and saying, I want a logo or I want a thing, and always feeling that was an incomplete solution. And I just didn't want to do strategy. It's like I could, I just don't want to. So design is a lot to carry on its own. And I really felt like I want other people who do that work, who specialize in that work and can go to the depths that I don't have the bandwidth to go to, because I need to focus on the part I really do well, which is the design. And I'm not maybe as strong in doing strategy work. So I think, there was definitely this, for me, a very appealing sort of cohesion when we all came together. And I think where we really lucked out was that our personalities mesh well, and we sort of have like our 2 left brain, 2 right brain, or I should say more two more structural type thinkers and 2 more loosey-goosey thinkers. So like we kind of, balance each other out. Georgina is our spreadsheet girl. And we love her for that because she likes them. And I could slip my wrists over spreadsheets. So, it's a really good balancing, I think, of our strengths. There was something you had said, Diane, and I was going to add on to it. Now I can't remember what it was. So
chime in if you remember it. But the other thing that I will call out is that the 4 of us are kind of the hub of this collective. But because we are a collective, we also have a network of other freelancers that we tap into. So for example, a project came through one of my connections, and based on the needs of the product or project, they didn't necessarily need design. They didn't necessarily need content. They really need help with, really digging deep into their business and in-depth interviews with all of the stakeholders that were contributing to the success of their business. So we were able to tap into another strategist that had that specific skill set so that we could serve that client as best as possible, versus any one of us trying to turn ourselves inside out to try to fake the funk and be this thing that the client needed that we had never really done before. So it really does, this model adds a value and benefit on both sides. The client is getting exactly what they want from individuals that have expertise in exactly that. And then we're also not having to be anything other than who we are and do anything other than the work that we know how to do and that we actually want to do. That's the big piece, right? We all in our lives have had to do stuff that we probably didn't want to do, but now we can be a little bit more selective around the projects that make sense for what we want to do and experience in our own individual lives. So I think on that note, let's dig a little bit deeper into this collective model that we've created. But before we go too deep into our spiel, what does a collective model or a collective approach mean to you all? What do you think of when you hear that? No wrong answers, just would love to hear your perspectives.
Well, I just really think flexibility, but I feel like there must be more to it than that. So I'm curious what other people think.
Balanced teams and the kind of a different expertise model that you've been talking about.
Yeah, that cross functionality that you're bringing, right? What I think it was Gilly's was just saying about, I want the work to be more holistic and strategic, and what I bring is this piece, right? And so that, we sometimes talk about, well, there's a few elements. It's like we talk about being generalizing specialists or specializing generalists. This idea that you need to bring all the disciplines together, whether that's all in one person or in many people, right? And that, as I was alluding to earlier, this idea that we don't ever want the work disconnected from the why. And so bringing it back to that, the ways you involve the client as well, right? People come to us and expect whatever we're trying to do, right? They're like, okay, great. I want you to do this for me. Can you do this for me? And then I expect you to go away and do that and then bring it to me. And then I'll tell you whether I like it. Right. And so I think most marketing groups, I won't say agency, but I think it's a fairly modern way of working that a lot of folks do, to say, hey, can we get feedback along the way? And let's do several, the expectation of iterations and I don't know, I could be wrong about, but that's one of the elements of Agile that I think are sort of bleeding into the rest of the world. And I think fit really well with marketing. Because people try to, tell you what they want. They tell you what they think they need. It's not really what they want. They don't actually have the words for it because they're not the ones who have the vocabulary. Right. And so that all feels really familiar to the origins of the Agile world, which was, people want technology. They don't actually have that language. They don't really know what they want until they see it. And so how do we build systems that expect that instead of penalizing it,
Absolutely.
Yeah, by
Some
the way,
things
thank
that-
you. Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you, Veronica. Yeah, some of the things that I picked up on is the fact that you guys self-organized and it was so organic. And that's what we'd like to see in Agile, is that teams can come together and self-organize with their different areas of expertise. We also have, roles, specialty roles around like product ownership or product management, and they really do dive deeply into customer journey maps, empathy mapping, things like that. So that the customer at the end of the day might go, gosh, I didn't realize that's what I really needed. And so that's a lot of what you guys are doing as well. So those type of things really fascinate me. And then I'm sure you guys will get into this a little bit later, but you guys are separate companies. How do you bill your clients?
How do we build them? Is that what you're asking?
Build them, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a question we get quite a bit. So we had decided, and Vanessa, Diane, feel free to chime in. We had this conversation early on when we, were very clear that we didn't want to be a quote agency. And we didn't want anyone to feel beholden to sort of this entity. So what we did was that actually the Alkimie Collective is actually just kind of a front-facing brand. So we present ourselves as a unified group, but behind the scenes, we are still each independent of one another. So we essentially subcontract each other. So the contracts will always go out through one of us. So generally it's whoever brought the client in. Sometimes that shifts. If one of us ends up sort of building more of the relationship with somebody, then that person kind of ends up sort of taking on that administrative role. But the contracts and the billing will just go through one of us, and then we bill each other. We basically invoice one another. So we've kept it really, really simple, and it's worked out well. So we kind of just felt like we didn't want to complicate things. We didn't want to have to open another bank account. We didn't want to have to worry about, like if we had a shared credit card or any of those things that would come with being sort of a formal entity. But having the unified front helps, I think, simplify things for the client. So they're not feeling like they're communicating with 4 different contractors. And, we've worked together enough now. I mean, it's been a couple of years actually, that we've kind of got our system down, I think, pretty well that way. So it's very seamless for the client.
That's awesome.
We have one email account. It's hello@alkimie.co. So all communications go out from Alkimie and come into Alkimie with clients. And we all have access to it. And we have it set up that when an email comes in, it automatically gets distributed, forwarded to each of our personal email addresses. So we're all kind of in the loop on what's happening as it's happening. We all have access to all of the communications versus any one person kind of holding, being the gatekeeper of the information, because ultimately it is about that collaboration. It is about us, each of us having our respective pieces and parts, but also having an understanding of everybody else's pieces and parts and where we are in the process. I think that's how we are able to work kind of so seamlessly, is because there is that visibility and access and kind of coordination that happens seamlessly between us.
And that's what we call an agile transparency. Like you guys, you use the word visibility, but we like to use the word transparency, that everything's transparent and visible. It's anybody can at any given moment go in and see exactly what's going on.
Mhm.
And you also refer to, like, you kind of have an understanding of what other people are doing, like their area of expertise. And we refer to that as T-shaped team members, where you know something quite deeply and you know a little bit about everything else, so you understand how it all kind of ties together. I also liked that you guys were talking about, subcontracting, bringing in other people. Like if either you're not able to do, you don't have the capacity, we use the word capacity to be able to do that. You lean on other experts and you can bring them in. And in the Agile world, we might move team members around based on the work that comes in.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, I think that maps pretty well to how we work. Yeah, and I mean, as Vanessa had mentioned earlier, like we do have a really long list of other people who do the things that we're not experts in, and don't want to be experts in, but we know our clients need them, and so we can just kind of ping them as needed. Which also gets into, the client really only pays for what they're actually needing. They're not paying an agency overhead. They're paying for the actual human beings who are working on their project. And sometimes that's not all four of us. In fact, most of the time it's not all four of us. And sometimes it's somebody else that we've yanked in to help with something. Like, for example, we don't really do digital marketing. We can do some aspects of it, but digital marketing as a whole is not our thing. So we have a digital marketing partner. So if we know a client's going to need that, we just yank her in. And then she, becomes part of this soup for that project. So yeah, it works nicely. I think it also helps us build this broader community. I think we like the idea of, like Diane spoke about community earlier, like I think we like this idea that it also gives us the ability to help support other small business owners in our space by utilizing their expertise. And then they are often reciprocal. Like, for example, that digital marketing expert, she just contacted me about partnering with her and another strategist on a project. So we can kind of, reach outside of our core group, even with some of the other people that we collaborate with.
Mhm.
I also like that you guys mentioned the word values. You guys have shared values.
Mhm.
And we talk about core values in Agile, and that we share and then we can all be aligned on these things.
Yeah, and I think, I know Sherry, you and I had talked about this a while back as far as, I think I mentioned to you, this model works if everybody is, I think, is thinking beyond themselves. Like you can't be a hoarder, right? Like you've got to be willing to share the wealth, share the work. I think we've been fortunate. I think all of us kind of have a pretty generous spirit about, like, hey, I don't know if this project's for me, maybe it's for you. I don't even know if I'm needed on this project, but maybe you are. So I think, that's partly why it works, is that we have each other in mind. So I think emotional intelligence is probably a big part of what makes a collective model work. Like, I don't think this would work particularly well with somebody who wasn't concerning themselves with the rest of the people in the group.
Mhm.
So, Sherry, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I know you and I talked about this a little bit, like the emotional intelligence component of working in this way.
Yep. Well, we do have some groups here in Boulder area that actually in their training actually refer to emotional intelligence, EQ, as part of your mindset and your
Mhm.
growth mindset as well. So it's definitely and they're bringing in more of those softer skills into a lot of the training that in the Agile community. We're seeing that more and more.
Sherry, you mentioned transparency, and I think the flip side of that, or maybe it's the companion to that, is honesty, because we're really honest with each other too around, this is feeling like too much right now, I need to step away, or this project doesn't align with my personal values, so I don't know that this is something that I want to be a part of, or that I want the collective to work on as a representative of the collective, I don't know that we should be associated with something like this, for example. So being able to have that candor with one another also really helps it to flow really seamlessly, right? Because there is no guessing, there is no beating around the bush. There is no ego attitude, maybe, that comes with it. So it ends up working out really well because we can just be honest with each other and be really honest with the other individuals that we bring in. At the end of the day, I think that's what we all look for in relationships, right? So we really lean into that with this model.
That's wonderful, because we do talk a lot about creating cultures of psychological safety and trust. And another core value is around courage, like having the courage to speak up about something.
I think what all of this gets at too, what everybody is saying is that, we're really trying to embody that alignment we've been talking about, and it plays a huge factor into how we show up for clients too. It's that internal, external alignment, and it's really helping us position ourselves in a way that we want to operate, because we didn't want to look like a typical agency model. We're not speaking on behalf of any agency, but maybe there are more egos, or maybe there are more personalities to deal with, and the focus may be lost on the client. So I think, that's another aspect, is that when we come together on a project, or when we bring in certain people, or when we switch around team members, we're focusing, and this is part of our brand, is to support other brands, looking at what do they really need. And I think, Veronica, you were saying it earlier about like, people may, say they need something, but it's not what they want. I like to say, it's like people know what they want, but they may not know what they need. And I think that's where we come in and really show them, we've heard you, we've listened, you're the main priority, and we really think this is what will get you where you want to go. So we will rejig and configure to make sure we help you reach your goal.
And just from a very, oh, sorry, Vanessa, go ahead. Because I was going to say something really mundane. So go ahead.
Only other thing I would add to that, kind of build on top of that, is the other part of this model is that we're not hierarchical, right? So there is no room for ego because we're peers. And that enables us to kind of be really aligned when it comes to decision making. But it also is really valuable for the clients, because a lot of times, you'll get pitched by the big boss, and then the people that are doing the actual work are the junior level individuals who are fresh out of college, right? And so that's not fun for the client either. So we are always making sure that there's an equal ability to do this work at a very kind of experienced level. And without that hierarchy, it keeps us from doing this is junior level work, or this is senior level work, or whatever it is. It's just all about the work, and it's all about working together to get us to and get the client to the end goal.
Yeah. And actually, to adding on to that, as far as being, non-hierarchical, we're kind of more of a circle. That each of us is an entry point into that circle. So in terms of how we even get clients, like all of us could potentially be bringing a project in, because we all have different experiences aside from one another and different networks. So each of us, we're kind of a constellation in that regard. So, again, using myself as an example, if somebody comes to me and says, I want a logo, it's a really good opportunity for me to say, well, I'm not going to do that unless there's a strategy behind it. So then that can potentially, open up the conversation for the group to really address that person's needs from a much more holistic viewpoint than just, I need a logo. So all of us have that opportunity. If something comes along and we feel like, hey, there might be something here for at least one other person in our collective to work on, then we can pull that in. So it's actually also a really good way for all of us to gain more business. But I was going to say that's really kind of just mundane stuff, but I kind of wonder if there are questions about just kind of like how we function, like beyond billing, just some of our nuts and bolts. I mean, we communicate on Slack. and I'm just sharing this because I know there's some curiosity about, how we just sort of how we work, like literally how we work. We communicate on Slack. We have a Google Drive where everybody has access to everything. We've got a few different project management tools we use that everybody has access to. And we just share the costs of those things. So Georgina, our spreadsheet maven, keeps a documentation of all of that. So we just kind of reconcile with each other monthly. So I'm just sharing that in case anybody's curious how we do it. That's how we do it. It's very, very simple, really.
That was going to be one of my questions. And what I really like, generally speaking, about the approaches that you guys have talked about so far is how simple it is. Keeping things very, very simple, building them based on the need and trying them as an experiment, not overbuilding, keeping really flexible and not being brittle. It's really great stuff. Great to hear. I think the other one here is I'm hearing a lot of very, very strong self-awareness. What is my identity? What is my vision? What are our values? What motivates me? And that those are in common. And so working together, with a common goal that is focused on the customer and the value for the customer, and knowing your limits and where you can go and how you hand off. Those are all definitely things, that are encouraged and signs of good agility in the Agile space. The other one that kind of keeps recurring is this bit about being clear on what the problem is and then coming to get on the solution. And definitely within software development, pretty much any Agile framework now, is this application of design thinking, where there's kind of a double diamond of diverging and converging on what the problem is and diverging and converging on what solutions could be. So that's a theme as well that I'm hearing here that's certainly big in the Agile space. How often do you guys kind of catch up? I'm interested very much in your communications, your handoffs, and how you learn together.
Yeah, so we have, like Keely mentioned, we have Slack. So that's really where the majority of our collective communication happens. We have different channels on speaking opportunities versus prospective clients, so on and so forth. But we also have, we have a 2-hour meeting every other week to dig into the business, right? So what are the leads that are up ahead? What are the administrative things that we need to tackle? Like, it's the end of the month. We need to reconcile all of our expenses and, figure out who owes who what. So that meeting is, goes from everything granular about operating the business or the collective to high level. What have we learned over these last few weeks, months, whatever it might be? What was the experience with this client that we just finished with? And how can we take that learning to infuse it into future projects? So it really is a time for us to reconnect as a collective and really talk through, where do we go from here? What needs to happen from here to continue with this work in a way that feels good for everybody? We're really, you were talking about self-awareness. And I think that's another really nice thing about all of the different personalities that come to the table within a collective. It's not homogenous. So we are all looking at life and the world and like the work very differently. And we hold each other accountable to our truths, right? Like Diane's a workaholic and we're always getting on her case about it. And so we're all, we are there to be a support for her as a human, as well as for this group, because it is hard to be self-aware sometimes when you're so kind of mired in the day-to-day work. So those conversations really help kind of elevate us out of the day-to-day and really looking at like, does this still feel good? Do we want to still be doing this? And is the way that we're doing it still working for all of us? We also have a block on our calendar every week where if there's a prospective client that has reached out to any one of us because they want to learn more and talk and talk through a project, then we always have that window of time open that we know we're all available and we can all jump in if we need to. We don't always all need to be there, but we just know that it's there should the need arise, that all 4 of us need to be in the conversation with this potential client. I mean, those are some of the key ways that we operate and communicate. I know there are some other side meetings, like Diane and Georgina have accountability meetings with each other, and I'll let you speak to that, Diane, but just really showing up for each other, not just in the work and the deliverables, but showing up for each other as humans to continue to make sure that we are all feeling good and healthy and well, so that we can show up as our best to be a part of this collective.
Yeah, I think, thanks for bringing that up. I forgot about that. And maybe that's part of the Agile model. We all have, different check-ins with each other. And that check-in I have with Georgina kind of happened organically early on. And it was because Gili's mentioned she's very into spreadsheets. She looks at things so differently from me. I am more of that big picture creative thinker, and Georgina is in the details. So we found for each other that it was an asset to connect with each other, because we share different perspectives and come from, things from a different lens and viewpoint, but we also do a lot of similar work. So we just found it was really nice to check in with each other and hold one another accountable. And that organically also turned into something that we now do for Alkimie, where we have these Alkimie chats or conversations, keeping it very simple. It's like a podcast format, but we only do it on Zoom. We record it, very, very simple. And we just were having these conversations that were really great. And we're like, let's just record it for everybody to watch. And we share it on Instagram and LinkedIn. And that's become part of the collective model now too.
And I think also this also kind of then, we also just started doing kind of quarterly planning. We all got together, what was it, September? I guess it was the end of September. Whenever it was, we got together in person because we're all generally, within an hour of each other, and did quarterly planning and talked about, what should we be focusing on for this last quarter of the year, and also looking at the first quarter of next year, and what can we feasibly do, because we are all super busy. So, really mapping out what are the priorities for this quarter, and then what can we shove off until January. So that also helps keep us focused, I think, on just what are we doing now. And then we also, mirror this with our clients. We have check-in meetings with them that are regularly scheduled. So like Diane, Georgina, and I have a client together. So every week we have a standing meeting to go over what's going on with that client, like internally, just amongst ourselves. And then every other week we meet with the client. And not all of us are always on that. In fact, they have kindly allowed me not to be on those calls if I'm not needed. But we get a report afterwards. So whoever's running the call will take notes so the rest of us can see what happened. And that way we can also track, like, did the client do the things that we needed him to do? Are we still waiting on something? So everybody's in the loop, whether they were on the call or not. And now we have another client where the same is true. We have a weekly meeting with them. And in fact, they just finished the whole strategy phase with Diane and Georgina. So now they're moving into working with me on design, but we just had a handoff call. So Diane and Georgina were part of that. And then one of them will probably continue to be on that call as we go forward, partially because my experience with the design piece is that clients kind of lose track of what the strategy was if the strategist isn't there to keep them in check. So, because Vanessa and I had a client like that, and I was like, can you come back? Because they're getting off course. So they'll listen to you maybe more than they'll listen to me. So we have that same kind of, pattern with clients that we do amongst ourselves.
Well, something you said, Gili, too, which I just thought of, and isn't in our notes, but might be interesting to loop into the conversation too, is like, Gili, you have almost like your own team as well that you work with design, which you can speak on. But you really helped us on our project because you brought up the idea of project management, and you have someone you work with who then came in and started doing project management for us. So it's almost like Inception, this like team within a team to help the bigger team.
Yeah, so I have a couple of VAs, one of whom is actually a designer. The other one is really more of a project manager VA. So she actually stepped in for a while. Georgina was out of the country for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, for a while anyway. And we knew she does a lot of our project management. And again, that was sort of determined by, she actually likes doing it. I hate doing it. So it's, I'm not sure how you feel about it, Diane or Vanessa, but so we build into the project that Georgina is going to handle project management. She was out of the country, so we needed somebody in the time zone or closer to the time zone to be doing project management while she was away. So we brought in this VA that I work with to kind of help support Georgina so that she didn't feel like she had to be constantly catching up. And then I have these 2 designers who also work with me. So it is kind of the team within the team, because now I do a lot more art direction and they're doing more of the execution, at least on certain things.
So I want to be mindful of the time. It's 7 right now. So got about 30 more minutes. Just want to make sure you guys are good where you're at.
Yeah, thank you. I think we covered a lot of what we were actually going to talk about.
Were there any more questions about kind of how we operate before we go into just our last little bit around kind of what our experience has been and what we've learned, what works, all of that? Well,
No, not necessarily questions. I was just going to do more mapping of what you guys are doing and what we call it an Agile. When you talked about going over the work that you guys have been doing and then infusing it into the future work, we call those retrospectives. It's also a time for our teams to kind of do a little bit of team building, maybe even work through conflict, like, well, that didn't work out very well. How do we, get through that kind of thing, and take those learnings and bring it into the next iteration or infuse it into the future work, as you had mentioned. I was a little bit curious, those conversations that you have with those clients on a fairly regular basis, if it's, and we refer to them as cadences, like the cadence that you have with your clients. Are you demoing like where you're at with some of the work at some point? Like, this is how far I've gotten it. Do you like this color? Is this, the direction? Do you think we're going the right direction here? That type of thing. Are we aligned here?
Yes. So yeah, the calls that we have with our clients, really, we generally have an agenda for like, here's what we're going to look at, and here's what we want your feedback on. We actually just had in this handoff call yesterday, since we're going from strategy to design, also gave them kind of the basically like, here's how I'd like to receive feedback from you. Like, here's the kind of feedback that's actually helpful. Because a lot of times what happens in design, of course, is you get an opinion, like a personal opinion, versus like, okay, are we on brand? So that's again why I always want like a strategist there as my security blanket, because they can sort of help pull the client back into that. But there are always these checkpoints with the client to get the feedback as we're going. So for example, in the design stage, we're going to first look at mood boards. So they're going to have something to respond to, give me feedback. There may be another round, or there might not be another round. It really just depends like on where we land. So yeah, with each call, there's something that's getting progressed with feedback.
And it might depend on the client, but usually how we have it set up now is we have an internal check-in call as the team before we have a client call. So we can go over those points on what's been covered. What do we need to talk to them about on the next call? So there is a set structure and agenda.
Great, awesome. And when it comes to the project management, what type of work is Georgina looking at, and how do you guys also prioritize your work and know when it's done? Like, do you guys check each other's work? What do you guys do with that?
Yeah, I guess we really do. I mean, I know like from the design perspective, like I definitely want the input of the others on the team often before I send it to the client. Because you kind of don't want anybody internally to suddenly be surprised by what got sent. Like, I didn't know you were going to do that, and to also, again, make sure that it's in alignment with the strategic aspect of the project. So, certainly I would want feedback from Diane, Georgina, or Vanessa before sending it directly to the client, in case there's anything that internally we feel should be tweaked before it goes out.
It's always helpful to have that checks and balance, right? Because, you know, if I'm putting together a strategy, then I'm like, my mind is already kind of made up on the direction that I'm going. But if I'm not getting it in front of other people, and I always try to make sure that the rest of the team that's involved in the project is a part of those strategy workshops and conversations so that they're hearing from the client as well. So it's a nice way to have checks and balances by previewing it with the team internally, because maybe I completely missed something that a client said that really would impact the work that we're doing or whatever it might be. So it really is just another way for us to make sure that the work ultimately truly is representative of what the client is looking for.
Awesome. And the other thing I would map is you guys use the word strategy, and in some Agile frameworks, they talk about strategic themes that then get broken down to deliverables eventually. Like it gets decomposed down to things that are deliverable. But we also talk about vision. And so I really like the idea of like having people come back, like, can you get us refocused here about like what it is we're doing here? So that's also very much a natural part of Agile to circle back. Let's remind everybody what our vision is.
That's a big part of kind of every presentation as we go through the process. We always start by grounding ourselves and everyone else. And okay, this is what we've agreed to, like just as a refresher, this is what the strategy is. And so that's why you're going to see what you're about to see, because it's in line with what we've all agreed to and said yes to. Right?
And Vanessa, you're really good at that. Even when we had our quarterly planning meeting, you kind of brought in internally, not even client facing, you brought us back to, okay, let's reset. And does this align with the overall vision, which was really helpful.
I think it also, Vanessa and I had a client, I kind of lost track of time now when we work with them. They were not the easiest client to work with. They definitely needed to be brought back on track. But one of the things that actually happened was after we'd gone through, I had created, 20 different logo directions for them, all of which I think internally we felt fit the brief. But then the client kind of came back and was like, we kind of want this other thing. And, Vanessa was able to look at it and say, well, that's not in line with all of this foundational work that we did. So then it was like, so does the strategy need to change? Like, or does the brand message somehow need to change? Like, is that the problem? So like, that way we can kind of come back and check, like, what's actually going on here? Is it the client just completely going off the rails, or does something here need to change so that we can realign them?
Yeah. So when all of those different options that you came up with, we refer to that as set-based design, so that you can quickly pivot if you're in the middle of delivering something.
That's the thing. Like we want to be good partners for our clients, and there are a lot of things that they know that we don't know, right? They know their business better than we know their business. They always will. We also are experts in what we do. So being able to balance those, right? Like having respect for the knowledge that they have for their business, and also this kind of reciprocation of respect for what they brought us in to do. Sometimes that's an easier exchange for some clients than others. But really, we want to be able to be agile for our clients, because they have a lot of demands on their time and attention and their resources. They have a lot of things that they need to get accomplished, and they need people that can kind of move and adjust and pivot with them at the same speed at which everything is moving and adjusting and pivoting on their end. So we really try to be able to do that for our clients while keeping them rooted in, this is ultimately what we're trying to accomplish, and this is ultimately what we agreed to. Like, let's not lose sight of that.
Yes. We actually, we had a question here. Vanessa, you were actually queued up to ask the question, but I'll ask it. Which was, does anybody have a story to share when you were expected to do a part of a job or process that was foreign to you?
Where that made
Veronica's
you?
my.
I know. I'm
Veronica's
like, I
smiling.
love the question. I feel like the answer has to be yes, but I'm struggling to bring it. I feel like that's the kind of thing you try to put in a corner of your brain and forget about. Like, just kidding. That time I was asked to do the thing I really suck at.
I personally have an example where I worked on a project for FEMA. Like, who knows about FEMA stuff and elevation and community mapping and like do you know anything about that? So it was basically, given an 800-page document and none of it made sense. And I'm reading this paragraph over and over again. And I'm like, I'm going to be here forever. I'm going to die here. So it was actually, I had to approach it in a way that you learn a new language, which is immerse yourself in it. And so I ultimately, I'm like, I gotta be smarter than this. So I went to the tables that were in this 800-page document and reverse engineered it. Where is this, ultimately, here's the synthesized information in this table. Where does that come from? And then put together workflow maps, workflow charts about like how this all kind of ties together, and then worked very closely with people at FEMA to say, did I interpret this correctly? So it wasn't just me by myself. There was a team of us doing this all together. But that was something like, even today, I kind of have like some, flashbacks of just the little tiny details on all of that. So that's an example.
Anyone else?
I'm just going to throw this out there. I think, especially in marketing, clients want better, smarter, faster, cheaper, faster all the time, right? Like that, it has become kind of the expectation. And so we don't always have the luxury of immersing ourselves and getting up to speed on a category. So that's why we need to bring in and be agile enough to bring in the resources that can kind of jump in and hit the ground running, because the client doesn't have time for us to get up to speed. They want to work with us, but they need it now. They need it yesterday. So we want to be able to kind of serve that need, fill that need for them, and do good work in the way that we want to do it, but also be able to bring the right people to the table to kind of hit the nail on the head first try.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. I don't have a specific example, but what I'm thinking of here from an agile perspective is when we are faced with things we've never done before, things that are complex, how do we go about, making that closer to simple, or at least moving toward complicated, and some of the systems that we use for that. That one, as well as, I guess, trusting in the team, that whether it's the team that you're working with, like a client, that they know their business, they know. So you don't necessarily have to know all that, right? You have to know how to ask the right questions, how to frame and guide the questions and the conversations and the thinking. You don't actually have to be the expert at it. And I have to imagine, kind of dovetailing off what you were saying, is you have to rely on that to get the right answer.
Great point.
For sure. Should we move on to almost our last slide here? Oops. Oh, this is not, sorry. Yep, sorry. So
I can kick this off because I'm keeping an eye on the time, but we just have a few points we want to make to kind of bring home this whole conversation. And this is so great because I feel like, and Gili, Chris really loves your image, by the way. So in the chat, just a note, the visuals, because we're learning so much and we hope you are as well. So in that spirit, we want it to look at, there's good, bad, ugly that comes with any sort of business, but we wanted to kind of look at what's worked, where we've come across some challenges and how we've met them head on, and then, all of the lessons that we've learned along the way. So when it comes to what's working for us. It's, everything we've talked about already, but what's really great is that we're not pigeonholed in what we're doing. Like, we may feel sometimes in our own businesses, the fact that we can all come together and, as the ladies have shared already, take things on, projects that excite us, be selective about what we're doing, really come to the table with our strengths, be honest, share when we're at capacity. It just, that flexibility and fluidity, which has been a theme today, just really, benefits us as we work as a collective. And then along with that, the premise of learning, we're always learning and we're always discovering new things and maybe finding new strengths about ourselves and one another. And as we bring partners into the table too, I think every project is just a new discovery and seeing what they need. And, like Gilly was saying, bringing a digital marketing expert in, or maybe a web designer, and just seeing how we can support and take them to that next level, which also takes us to our next level in a way as well. And then, yes, we beat this one home, but flexibility, but flexibility to also, not just do the work, but pursue what we're passionate about personally and professionally. Because as Vanessa was saying, we all have lives. And yes, I am the group workaholic. I'm working on it. Hobbies, all the things. I think that's what happens when you love the work you do. Sometimes it doesn't feel like your job and you're like, what time is it? But, we're supporting each other as a group because we came together as human beings, first and foremost, during the pandemic, saying, this is really hard. We feel isolated normally as a business owner, but there's just another layer on top of that right now. And we came together with those values, as you were saying, Sherry. And now, to quote Georgina, actually, hopefully I get this right. She shared this with us on a call the other day. You form it, you storm it, and then you normalize it. Is that, Sherry, you're nodding. Is that something?
It's the Tuckman model.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Thank you, Georgina. So we formed ourselves. We're kind of in the storming phase now, and then we're going to even out and normalize. And I think,
And then perform. Then you'll be performing.
Oh, we didn't have that one. And perform.
Yes.
We can add it. Perfect. Well, that's what we're doing. We're here to support each other as humans and professionals. I love that. We're learning so much. And yeah, the last point is something we touched upon already, and Vanessa and Gilly, you drove this home. The fact that we're non-hierarchical and almost like that constellation, that circle, has just really benefited all of us. And that we can bring in opportunities as individuals and then just continue to grow and thrive as a group as well. And with that, that's what has worked for us. Now we can talk about what we've struggled with a little bit. Gilly, you want to take it away?
Yes, I will take the middle line, the bad. And I wouldn't say it's bad. It's just, nothing is without struggle, right? So some of our challenges, I think currently, since I guess we're in the storming phase, is that right? So we've struggled a little bit with helping clients understand this model. We have a few clients who seem to get it and they're in. We've talked to prospects who get it, appreciate it, but are still not fully in. So I think, we're still kind of challenged with where do we find the right clients for us to work with as a collective. So we're.
The thing I'll add to that is, I think they like the idea of a collective model, but the way that we approach the work is sometimes a challenge for them. We are strategy first, period, point blank. Like, we do not come to the table to just tactically execute. We want to dig deep into the business, into the brand, to really make sure that we are bringing solutions that help get them from point A to point B. And not every client wants that. They want someone that will just go execute. And so I think that's another piece of it is, you have access to all of these people that can do the things. Like, why can't you just do the thing? But part of our thing is starting with strategy.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good distinction. Like, yeah, they like the idea. They understand the value sometimes, but then I don't know if they get scared. It's big, right? Like, what we do is not fast. it's an time investment. It's a financial investment to work with 4 people over usually several months. So I think that's, where we're still kind of trying to find our right fit as far as clients who want to sign up for that and understand the value in working that way.
Yeah. I think some of our kind of higher level learnings overall is that more and more Agile is the way that the world is starting to turn and operate, right? So with the bigger agencies, with the, very strict and stringent process that just doesn't work for clients anymore. So we're really starting to see the fall of the traditional agency model. So it's nice to be a part of this collective in this time, because while clients don't necessarily know or can't kind of articulate the fact that they want something like a collective or they want something like an agile model, they just know that the way things have been happening isn't working for them anymore. So we're seeing more and more of that. And I think you all have kind of touched on it in different ways, that Agile is kind of infiltrating every aspect of the world, not just marketing, not just tech. So that's something that we're seeing regularly, and we're glad to be a part of it and be doing it, even though we didn't know we were in the beginning. And then the other thing that we continue to see and learn for ourselves is that as we connect with each other and work on different types of projects and bring in other individuals to do this work with us, we get so much more exposure to so much more thinking, right? If you are always working with the same people, you kind of stagnate a little bit. So being able to have exposure to different people's experiences and different ways of thinking and different approaches really helps to broaden and strengthen the work that we do. So that the aspect of bringing in new and different resources as often as possible, it kind of has to be the cornerstone of this work, because that's how we continue to deliver on a collective, like a truly collective, truly agile model for our clients. So that's our jam. What final questions? I know we have just a few minutes. Any other questions, thoughts, anything like that?
Sorry, I got a couple kids in the background, but trying to feed them dinner while I was thinking. So as you kind of stumbled into this direction, like what kind of things are you looking at to take wisdom from the Agile community?
Someone's having fun back there.
Oh, they're having a blast.
That was one of the big questions that, we kind of had for you all, is what's the one piece of advice that you didn't get early on in your Agile career or Agile approach, that you would now give to anyone kind of transitioning into this world? If you think back into your, early days, what's the thing that you wish you would have known earlier on?
So for me, I found like every once in a while I need to go reread the manifesto and just remember that that's what it's about. It's not about Scrum. It's not about Kanban. It's not about product managers and product owners. It's about those values.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that as well. Like, Agile is all about a framework. Oh, hi. Agile's about a framework. It's not like set rules. You must do it this way. And it's really having a certain mindset of approaching things in a very experimental way and failing fast. So you can learn something from it and be able to and have the psychological safety to say, hey, this happened, didn't go so well, let's celebrate it because this is what I learned quickly. And then moving on. And then it's also just very much like an iterative process of what can we deliver that's just like one piece that is tangible, that is usable right away, instead of like really getting into this whole, like, we're building a ship here, guys, kind of thing. It's like, well, what part can you build that's, you can actually use? Like, what component of that, or what part of it, we're not going to build a ship in a day, kind of thing. So it's just having that kind of approach. And the idea of Agile is really, when we've done waterfall projects, we do this whole planning, we do the whole thing. It's a 6 months to a year type of thing. We deliver it, and we are way off course of what the client actually wanted. And so by working in it, iteratively, you're constantly getting feedback to stay as close to course as possible. It's also your ability to respond to the market. COVID happened. Every single industry had to find a way to pivot with the pandemic.
Absolutely.
I think keeping that people first, that is the main thing. Things that are frameworks, things that are methods, all of those are meant to try to describe something like agility, which you have. And that comes from those mindsets of people first, customer value, and the values that you have around experimentation and so forth. So I think staying true to that identity that you have, especially when it is in service to a client, don't let that get overridden by the ideas of various frameworks and so forth, right? Learn from them, use them to help you be more self-aware, but don't let them try and like change the way you operate. Use them as tools to continually improve them. That's my insight.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I was just thinking, the thing that I wished I knew at the beginning of freelancing, clients would ask for something that I could not do, and it didn't occur to me immediately to say I can do it, and then find help and subcontract it or work with someone, find a partner. So I think I just passed on a lot of work and projects because I just thought I can only do this one thing, and they've asked for all these other things. But just opening your mind a little, like, makes you realize you can work with other people or form a collective, or just do things a little differently so that you don't have to do everything, but you can offer so many things. So that's really what I learned.
Awesome. Well, we want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us, sharing your insight. We appreciate, getting to interact with like-minded individuals. So just thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for being here and sharing your Agile knowledge with us, because we blindly fell into it. So, on that note, if you're interested in following us and seeing, how we're doing things, you can find us at all of these touch points. So yeah, hopefully you stop on by.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sherry, for seeing the connection. That's super great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was, I'm having conversations with Gili, and then I'm seeing stuff on LinkedIn, and I'm like, man, you guys are so agile, it's crazy.
Nice.
And
fun.
when we talk about time frames and sticking to your time, we call those time boxes. So all right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Take care.
Thank you.